Trump's Grim Reaper, Russell Vought, thinks we're all stupid.
I noted that you did not include deficit numbers in your budget, even though those are required by law. Why not?
It's a discretionary budget. One of the things that I believe is important is to not confuse the country when we're in the middle of several reconciliation efforts over the next year. This is making sure that you can start the appropriations process. We did a mid-session review in which we will comply with the law at the mid-session point about how we are doing. It's also, one of the things when you do
I'll take that answer. Thank you.
When you take the full budget.
I disagree with the notion that it's discretionary to follow the law. The law did require deficit numbers. They can be extracted if one sits down and does the numbers from your revenue and spending projections, and that includes a deficit of about $2.2 trillion in 2027. I think perhaps the reason you didn't want to include deficit numbers is you didn't want to draw attention to we are in a situation where we are not in a major recession. And you're not including in this the cost of the war, so that's not a factor. And yet we're continuing to drive this nation deeper and deeper into debt. The projections show that in 20 years, with this 6% structural deficit, we will be in the position of basically being able to fund only Medicaid, Medicare, defense, and interest payments, which means no investments in healthcare, housing, and education. And those investments are diminished in your budget. So am I accurate in saying, extracting from the numbers you do have in there, that the deficit is going to be about $2.2 trillion for 2027 as projected in your budget? Again,
this budget has not intended to tell you where we would be from the deficit, but I do appreciate the concern on debt and deficits. I do appreciate the concern. When we came into office, we were staring into face $32 trillion in deficits. We have already gotten that down to $18 trillion. We were making progress each and every year.
On your own time, thank you. Actually, the situation is you added $30 trillion last year to the debt over the next 30 years, or $50 trillion if the interest rates are 1% higher than CBO projected. So rather than reducing deficits and debt, you are increasing them. And this is on top of $8 trillion in hugely strategically misshaped wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, $8 trillion that was not invested in American families. And this budget continues the process of saying we don't care about American families. The foundations for a family are health care, housing, education, and a good paying job. And the president's ran on providing a foundation for families. And this budget does the opposite. Social Security. Why not include a plan to address Social Security when we're just 6 years out from the trust fund being exhausted?
The president has made very clear that he is going to protect the benefits of Social Security into the future.
Exactly. So why not protect them? Why not have a plan? Why not come to Congress and say this has to be a priority? Why not have the president give a speech and say, we're really pleased that Chairman Graham held a hearing on Social Security, and we want to work in a bipartisan fashion to get this fixed and fixed now, not wait until the trust fund runs out of money and families are facing a 20 to 25% reduction in their benefits.
No senior is going to face a reduction in their benefits. This president is going to fully protect them at each and every points of the deadline. Right now, we have to get the government funded, and as a result, we need Congress to work again.
And the tax cuts you provided to the wealthiest were permanent, right?
Yes.
They were. But the tax cuts that were aimed at sort of working people, like no tax on tips, those will expire at the end of 2028, right?
Well, we will be working to extend those.
But you didn't make them permanent in that bill, did you?
We were not able to because of the reconciliation and cost allocations that we were given.
Right, because you didn't want to have to pay for them. So here's what I want to propose to you. I want to ask you. I've got a proposal, and so I want to make the other point that this distribution, where it shows the overwhelming share going to the very wealthy, will get even worse in 2028, right? When the no tax on tips expire and then this distribution table will get even
Again,
worse.
I haven't seen your chart. As someone
Okay.
who worked in this body and been a part of seeing many of the charts that have come through, I'd want to study it.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to share it with you.
And I realize there's some people that question Trump, but look at that command performance he gave the other night. I mean, it's like Charlemagne. That's like a Viking chieftain standing up there. Hey, Russ can tell he's a very imperfect instrument, right? But he's an instrument of the Lord. He's an instrument of the Lord for his vengeance, okay?
We think about Bannon and Vought as surrogates of Trump. When you hear Bannon describe Trump as an instrument of God, you start to think that maybe it's the other way around, that Trump is an instrument that Vought uses, that Bannon uses, or in their view, that the Almighty uses toward this longer term agenda.
The stark reality in America is that we are in the late stages of a complete Marxist takeover of the country. We are here in the year of 2024, a year that very well, and I believe it will, rival 1776 and 1860. And guess what? We have in Donald Trump a man who is so uniquely positioned to serve this role, a man whose own interests perfectly align with the interests of the country. That is nothing more than a gift of God.
The plans are already underway to ensure that if Donald Trump wins, all of the chaos and dysfunction and lack of preparation that hampered his first administration will not hamper his second. Vought is absolutely at the center of these efforts.
The majority of my time right now is being spent chairing the transition portion of the Project 2025. We have detailed agency plans. We are writing the actual executive orders. I don't want President Trump having to lose a moment of time having fights in the Oval Office about whether something is legal or doable or moral. If we fail, this election will have been for nothing.
The golden age of America begins right now.
Day one, in the most Trumpian fashion, the president sits down at a desk in an arena with a stack of executive orders. And he sets in motion just an absolute blizzard in the executive branch. Vought comes back into the same role, picking up right where he left off.
The president ran on the notion that the Impoundment Control Act is unconstitutional. I agree with that.
So it is the law of the land. I don't care what the president said when he was running. It is the law of the land.
This annual hearing followed the Trump administration's proposed fiscal budget for 2027, which includes a 40% increase to defense spending and then a 10% cut to any non-defense spending. The CBO projected back in July, so this is like before the invasion of Iran, that the law will add $3.4 trillion to the deficit through 2034. As director of the Office for Management and Budget, Russell Vought has one of the most powerful jobs in Washington. But unlike many of the other ghouls in the Trump administration, he's actually managed to keep a pretty low profile. Russell Vought has said that he embraces an ideology of radical constitutionalism, and in a 2022 essay urged the right wing to, quote, throw off the precedents and legal paradigms that have wrongly developed over the last 200 years. Think about what that means. If you can, because it's a really weird thing to say. Presumably, Russell Vaught's radical idea of the Constitution is to ignore or scrap any amendment after the 12th, and isn't it convenient that they want to keep the Electoral College? Weird how that works out. So, outlawing slavery, giving voting rights to all men and then to women, scrapping the poll tax, permitting the income tax, limiting presidential terms to just 2, lowering the voting age down to 18, and Democratic Senate elections, those are all things that presumably Russell Vought thinks is a mistake. Vought shouldn't be allowed to remain in the shadows. His name and face should be at the front of our minds when we talk about the fascist takeover of the American democratic system. Elon Musk was undoubtedly a useful idiot. A rich, powerful, useful idiot with a capital I. But Russell Vought is the architect of the entire Doggy operation. Doggy provided a cover for the reality that Vought was slashing spending and reappropriating funding through the Office of Management and Budget without even pretending to seek the approval of Congress. There's no doubt that when there are finally legal ramifications for the completely unconstitutional actions of this government, Elon Musk will be one of the first to be thrown under the bus. He's a show-off who is more than happy to pal around with Trump and be the face of his so-called MAGA crusade, but it's Vought who laid the groundwork that made it possible for Trump to jump around and then really wield a chainsaw. Don't get me wrong, Elon Musk deserves everything that's coming to him and more, but he is only the face of a much larger, more organized, and more insidious plot to destabilize the country from the inside.